Hey guys, I'm Chris Buck and a very warm welcome to Friday Fretworks, and this week we're going to be taking a closer look at John Lennon's guitar playing and trying to answer the question, was he any good? Now, a few weeks ago I uploaded a video at the channel taking a closer look at the Gibson Les Paul Jr. John Lennon custom shop model from a few years ago, and despite the video itself not really being about John Lennon's guitar playing per se, it surprised me to see so many remarks in the comment section below generally bringing John's capabilities as a guitar player into question. Now, this really surprised me. I mean, not that YouTube's comment section is probably the best place to take a cross-section of public opinion, but myself, I grew up desperate to learn Beatles tracks, but really struggling to get my head around them, primarily for the fact that they involved so many chords, the shapes of which sometimes were very unusual, and they all seemed to change shapes and chords so very quickly. So, as I said, I've always had it in the back of my mind that he was a fantastic guitar player. But in making this video, I've delved in to pick out a few examples which, I mean, there are innumerable Beatles tracks which I could have used as an example of his brilliant capabilities as a writer, not only of songs, but of great guitar parts to sit within those songs. But in the interest of really getting the point across, I've chosen 4 examples, 5 including Norwegian Wood at the start of the video, not only to demonstrate his capabilities as a writer, but, quite frankly, a brilliant guitar player. First up, we have a track which is actually quite often used when it comes to demonstrating John's proficiency as a deadly rhythm player, and that is, of course, All My Loving. It's one of those kind of bizarre Beatlesque moments, I guess, where all 4 members of the band are playing such unique, interesting and distinctive parts that not only sound great in isolation, but really hang together beautifully within the context of a mix. However, it is arguably John's part which is going to be the hardest to replicate, those unrelenting, constant triplet rhythms that he's playing, not only a workout for the right hand and the wrist, but, again, the chord changes and the speed at which he was changing them really are hard to replicate. Couple that with the fact that the chord shapes are actually more akin to banjo chords that he learned from his mother Julia, who was familiar with the banjo but not the guitar. You really do have a part that is very hard to replicate. This is a part that he was famously proud of, and honestly, it's easy to see why. It is a fantastic demonstration of how to play rhythm guitar. Now, for this example, I'm going to be using a borrowed Rickenbacker 325, modified to John's specs with the added Bigsby and the Burns knobs. Next up, we have another early example, a track from Hard Day's Night this time, which again puts focus on John's stellar right-hand work as much as it does the rapid chord changes with his left. However, it's actually the verse parts in I Just Want to Dance With You which are most impressive here, very reminiscent of the type of playing that Nile Rodgers would actually come to typify some kind of 14, 15 years later. Again, technically challenging, perfect for the song, and in this case, well ahead of his time. Next up, we have one of the few examples of John actually playing lead guitar on a Beatles record. He's notoriously lacking in confidence when it came to his guitar ability, as this interview with Andy Peebles, only a few days before he died, explains.
Yeah, I was never in the London scene in the 60s, whereas George and Paul would be going around everybody's sessions all the time, playing with everybody. I never played anywhere without the Beatles. I never jammed around with people at all.
Loyalty, or it just didn't interest you?
No, just shyness, insecurity, and I couldn't go in a session and play like George plays. You know, I'm limited vocabulary on the guitar and the piano. So what could I do going in with Cream or whatever they were doing those days? So I never hung out in the clubs playing. I hung out in the discos boogieing and drinking and that, but I never did that bit.
Bearing that in mind, it's perhaps no surprise that John's lead playing was confined to a very small handful of Beatles recordings, perhaps the most extensive and impressive of which was Get Back. So the story goes, it was recorded during a moment where George Harrison temporarily left the band during those troubled Let It Be sessions, frustrated by the ways that things were progressing. Whatever the reason, again, it's a fantastic example of John's guitar playing with really concise lead work and those precise right-hand rhythms. And maybe it's not as technically challenging as the earlier two examples, but again, a perfect example of John playing the right part for the right song. For this example, I'm using the Epiphone Custom Shop John Lennon replica Casino that he bought in 1965. Lastly, I'm going to leave you with what is probably my personal favourite out of all of these examples, and that is Revolution, taken from the White Album sessions. Although obviously it was never included, or this version was never included on the White Album. Incidentally, if you're interested in seeing how John achieved that unique, biting, direct-to-desk fuzz tone, I did a video on that a few months ago, which I shall link above. But again, it's John's guitar playing that we're focusing on here, and even if it is arguably the least technically challenging out of all the examples that I've used, it's that Chuck Berry relentless rhythm playing that oozes attitude and swagger, which really drives the band forward. Quite frankly, you can't imagine the track without it. Maybe not the most technically gifted player in the Beatles, but again, John's innate ability to write the perfect part for, quite often, the perfect song is the mark of a truly great musician when it comes to my opinion anyway. So, as ever, I've been Chris Buck. You're watching Friday Fretworks. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you next week. Cheers, guys. Take care.